So, hello everyone. I appreciate your taking the time to be here today. My name is Katya Aronov. I was born in Russia, and in the last 30 years, I live in Israel. I started my career back in 2000, and I have been into several roles since then. During the last 10 years, I work as automation developer. Should you have any questions after the event, I can be reached out on LinkedIn. And these are some of my previous talks and publications, which can be found on Google in case you'd like to take a deeper look into tips and tricks of automation implementation. And I will repeat this part at the end for those who would like to take a screenshot. So today, I'd like to take you through some lessons I learned from my past experiences. Although nowadays, in the world of Agile, everybody agrees that there is no way to produce frequent development releases without continuous testing, many companies are still finding it quite hard to implement automated testing. Sometimes it is too expensive, sometimes it is not efficient enough. I want to share with you what are the specific areas that require attention while creating automation project, which would yield valuable and long-term results. And when I say valuable, I mean automation outcome that is reliable, easy to understand, stable over time, and most importantly, one that helps to fail fast and recover at low cost. In this presentation, we will review some of the most common automation pain points and ways to overcome them to gain as much as possible, yet saving the cost where possible. Feel free to submit your questions as they come to your mind, and I will address them in the Q&A session that will follow the presentations part. So without any further ado, let's dive in. One of the biggest automation pain points is the implementation time. And those who have implemented automation probably know this feeling when your company wants testing coverage while you are busy with implementing solid infrastructure, which is a must. But in the meanwhile, you produce no visible value. To some people, test creation seems to be simple, just record and replay. But in fact, it isn't so. And we'll see why. Another crucial aspect to consider before starting with test creation is choosing a proper automation tool. And it was very interesting to hear Anton's point in his presentation, because I fully agree with this point, how important it is to take the time to evaluate the automation tool before you start implementing the automation project. There are so many tools out there nowadays. So further in this presentation, we will see a detailed checklist for such evaluation. Another pain point is unclear reports produced by automation. If reports are not easy to analyze, it creates a kind of bottleneck upon test failures and decreases automation value. Underqualified staff is yet another reason for automation projects to not produce desired results. Creating efficient automation does require certain technical background. This is a fact. Having said that, it doesn't mean that manual QA engineers cannot do automation. Last but not least, quite often everything seems to work fine at the beginning, but issues start to occur as we scale up and have dozens or hundreds or even thousands of tests. And there are usually two main reasons for that. The first one is the analysis bottleneck. Automation project is not just creating tests. Each time these tests run, the results should be analyzed, and it can get to many times a day. And the second one is test maintenance. As applications evolve, their functionality changes. As a result, existing tests require adjustments. The biggest pain point both analysis and maintenance cause is that the more tests we have, the less time we have for adding new coverage. Now let's see what we can do to assure efficient automation over time. First and foremost, we and our company management should understand that establishing efficient automation project cannot be immediate. One of the famous traps is to take some record and replay tool and record several scenarios. While it seems to be exciting and simple like a charm, unfortunately, this approach will prove as a waste of time quite soon. Once you'll have many recorded tests and some application functionality will change, you might find yourself analyzing and fixing these tests one by one, rather than adding more and more coverage for additional areas. So, automation is not an automagic, but it doesn't mean that it has to be a nightmare. The main question that should always be kept in mind is what is worth the investment and what is not. What is definitely worth the investment is automation infrastructure, which consists of an automation tool being used and tests infrastructure. I highly recommend that you do not underestimate these two, and therefore, I'd like to take a detailed look at each of them. So, first, there is no such a thing as the best tool. It should rather suit your own needs. Make sure that the tool supports what you want to cover. What kind of applications are you testing? Are these web applications or mobile applications, maybe desktop? Do you plan to run database queries as part of your tests? Do you need to perform API requests and validate responses to assure that your product functions properly? Once you mapped all of your technological stack support needs, request a trial access and conduct a proof of concept on your own scenarios. I suggest that you do not rely on marketing materials because they usually demonstrate their tools on a simple login flow and it always looks impressive. Most likely, your tests are more sophisticated than that. So take an average complexity test case and see if the tool supports what you want to accomplish. Tool maturity. The idea behind a certain tool can be great, but sometimes the tool is just not mature enough. So, as part of tool evaluation, create several scenarios and make sure that the only reason for failures and unexpectancies is that you missed something and not because the tool does not support scaling up. Also, find other companies who use this tool and get their impression. What worked for them? What didn't? Check how this relates to your expectations. I already mentioned that having self explanatory reports speeds up failures analysis. I'll name some tool features that ensure clear indication upon test failures and as a result lead to faster recovery. First, it is very helpful when failed steps are marked to stand out among other steps. Second, error messages. And this is not a very good example. What we see here is error, invalid parameter, expected an object. We don't understand anything from here, neither what was the flow that was performed, nor what was the expected and the actual result. So this is not a good example. Error messages should be clear and help to understand and reproduce the issue. Screenshots of the application state both the way it was expected to be and how it actually appeared. Preferably, have screenshots for successful steps as well. They are sometimes very helpful for troubleshooting. For example, if you want to go back and see what went wrong in the flow. And I can add to it something that I saw in Iran's presentation, video files, like in case of Cyprus. It might be even better tool to reproduce the issue. Fetching network logs from the browser to get more insights on a test flow will provide additional value upon failures investigation. And the ability to see the full list of parameters and their values at any point of test execution is also quite handy for troubleshooting. Another helpful automation tool feature is integration with external tools. For example, a ticketing system. If a ticket can be generated from the test, it can ensure a better description. And some tools automatically inject the test flow and environment details into a ticket description, which makes the issue easier to reproduce. Some even add a link to the test, so when the developer is ready with the fix, he can simply play the test again to make sure that after the fix, the test passes. And this is a good example of reducing the QA bottleneck. To be most efficient, we want to be as free as possible to add more and more coverage for the new features of our fast evolving applications. CI/CD tool. Having integration with this, you can set up your tests to run upon various execution triggers, for example, upon every code push, upon deploy to production, or on a nightly basis, and so on. This will help assuring that the bugs are caught as early as they are introduced. Using some CI/CD tools, you can create a dashboard which would present the current status of applications under test to your stakeholders. Add to it a short summary of areas where regressions were detected and the list of tickets that were reported. And here's how you don't only report bugs, but actually convert them into actionable items. The next point is open source versus commercial tools, which is a famous holy war. Other than creating tests, automation usually requires framework maintenance, such as managing underlying code libraries, setting up Dockers, handling synchronization issues, various infrastructure configurations, and other technical work, which is essential for automation project to succeed. And there are two ways to approach it. The first one is the open source tools. While they are invaluable to our software development community, it is important to remember that the time required to maintain them should also be considered. And I feel like I'm repeating what Anton just said, but it's important enough to stress it again. On the other hand, commercial tools can do this part on your behalf. But to put it simple, commercial tools will charge you for letting you concentrate on your business flows without worrying about the framework part, while with free tools, you will need to take care of it by yourself. Ultimately, free tools are not really free as it might seem. So consider this point while evaluating an automation tool, because framework maintenance is a significant part of automation project in terms of required effort investment. You'll need to invest anyway. So think which of these investments will be more expensive to you, the tool cost or the team resources. And the last part in this list of tool considerations is adoption simplicity. How easy is the tool setup and maintenance? Sorry, you can't probably see the images down here, but I'll tell you what's there. What onboarding do they provide? How soon can you start releasing efficient tests? How clear and up-to-date is their documentation? Do they provide ongoing support to shorten your idle time should you need assistance with the tool? I hope that this checklist will help you to find the most suitable tool for your needs. And no matter if you eventually choose to go with an open source tool or a commercial one, I strongly recommend the following best practices. They prevent tests from being fragile and can save significant effort investment to keep automation stable no matter how extensive it gets. Record and replay is a good starting point, but in order to decrease the time it takes to change broken tests, they should rather be built from reusable components which are generic, based on parameters, and keep your code simple. Each component, when I say code, I mean automation is a software, so it can be code or done in any other way, but keep it simple. Keep your blocks, keep your reusable components simple, where each component is a reusable single unit. And define naming conventions for your modules. They will keep your reports clear and tests easy to follow. Locator maintenance for those who automate web applications. This one can be a whole separate chapter, actually, but to name just a couple of best practices, remember that UI elements identifiers, definition, and maintenance is a significant ongoing effort. Some frameworks have embedded self-healing mechanisms to help tests to be tolerant to non-functional UI changes. But even if your tool doesn't support this, do what you can to assure reliable outcome and decreased maintenance over time. For example, keep the locators apart from tests. Have a single place of definition for each element. It will reduce the time that it takes should it ever need to be updated. Define locators carefully. Let's use this page as an example. Let's say you want to verify the caption of this documents button on this page. And currently we can see that there are two buttons here. So if we define this element as the second button on the screen, it would work. But if another button will be added later, the test might refer to the wrong button. Let's pretend that another button for, let's say, images was added somewhere here at the beginning as the first button. So now we have three. In this case, the test will attempt to validate that the second button on the screen has the caption documents, while in fact the second button caption would be text. The test will fail while there is no bug in the application, which will cause automation to produce a false alarm. As a result, we will take the time, investigate the issue, and apply the fix. Wasted time, which could have been saved if only we identified the element in a better way. Or, even worse, let's say we're not validating the caption, but we only want to check that the button is visible. And let's say the images button was added here, and there is a bug in the application and the documents button disappears. So currently we would have only the images button and the text button. Our test will attempt to validate again that the second button on the screen is visible. And guess what? The test will pass. Because the second button, text in this case, is visible. So in this case, although there is a bug in the application, the test will quietly pass. And this is an example of a false negative. And false negatives are our worst enemies. They cause tests to silently pass without revealing the issues, and it reduces automation reliability. So take the time to find the most unique locators for elements your test interacts with, which will still be correct even if other elements will be added to the page in the future. To build trust in automation, we must avoid false alarms. Another way to avoid false negatives is to verify the expected failures. Usually before releasing a test, we run it to make sure that it passes, right? So similarly, we should verify that it fails where it should. And you can temporarily change your parameters or mock the data or do whatever is needed to check that your test will catch the bugs should they occur. This is another way to increase reliability of your tests, even though it takes an extra effort. This effort is clearly worth it. And do not just open tickets to report the detected bugs. Work with the decision makers to prioritize the detected issues to have them fixed as soon as possible. While some failures might not be critical to your end users, they can block tests from continuing and testing other areas. In this case, not only does the test fail, but some of application functionality is not even being tested, and we don't know if we have regressions there. This is why I believe that issues reported by automation should get higher priority than if the same issue was reported by someone else. And if some of your tests report issues which are not in priority, get rid of these tests. Automation should report only relevant issues, and there is absolutely no point to create additional noise by reporting issues which no one looks into. Test fragility. Fragile tests are tests which sometimes pass and sometimes fail. And there might be various issues to cause this. Environment resources or network speed can easily impact test behavior. Make sure that your test is synchronized with your application. Wait for elements to appear before interacting with them. Some tools already implemented as part of the framework. Avoid static waits, also known as sleep functions, because on one machine, with 5 seconds will be sufficient, but on the other, the same part can take, let's say, 7 seconds and the test will fail. On the other hand, if you use sleep with a large number of seconds, it will increase your overall execution time for no reason. So rather use waiting for certain element state. Another recommendation to prevent test fragility: make no assumptions. The test should take care of everything it requires. Prevent dependencies between tests. If your test has any flow prerequisites, for example, a certain data that should be preloaded to the database or navigation to a certain page, then preload this data or navigate to this page as part of the test. This way, you can change the order of the tests or even deprecate some of them without impacting the others. And avoid using hard coded values as much as you can. Use parameters. If the value is stored in the database, then run a query as part of your test to retrieve it in runtime. If it's an application caption, keep them outside of your test, similar to element locators, and use parameters as references. This will make your test flexible to run on any environment and decrease adjustment effort upon changes. I know all of the above requires investment, but it will pay off in the long term. Sometimes you should slow down in order to go faster. And most probably, at any point of time, you will have lots of tests to automate because new application features are being delivered all the time. So, here are some guiding thoughts that might help you to focus the priorities. Obtain insights on how customers use your applications and start with commonly used scenarios. Work with the product owner to determine which bugs should block a release and automate these areas first. Concentrate on functionality rather than on visuality. Usually, a working button is more important than its color or the exact location on a page. Consider automation effort as opposed to manual effort. It is quite often worthwhile to leave certain scenarios in manual coverage. Probability versus impact. Earlier, I emphasized how important it is to invest in proper testing infrastructure. Having said that, keep in mind that it's a trade off. Don't take it too far and create a robust solution for every single little thing. Otherwise, you will not have the time to keep on going, producing more coverage. These are risk management decisions. Always consider the probability and the potential impact. Remember that sometimes done is better than perfect. And if you have a broken test and a new one to create, fixing an existing test should precede adding a new one. We want automation outcome to be reliable, so we should make sure that what we have works. How often does it happen that a test fails? We start analyzing the report to find the root cause, and we see that indeed the expected result didn't occur. We start looking for a developer who might have caused the issue, and then turns out that it's either a bug and the developer fixes it, or the change was intentional and we need to adjust our test to reflect the updated functionality. To me, it seems like either way, it's a waste of our time. What if we, as automation developers, stop being the bottleneck just because we are the only people who understand automation reports? If we invest in creating self-explanatory reports, which will not only tell us true is not equal false, but will provide clear indication on what was done and what didn't go as expected, alongside with screenshot video files and full information about how to reproduce the issue, as we discussed in details earlier. Then, in this case, we could hand over the responsibility of analysis to developers by setting up an automatic notification upon a failure to inform the person who deployed the code. Because in case a developer pushes a buggy code and he analyzes the failure, it would take him much less time to understand what might have caused the issue because he knows exactly what he changed. In case of an intentional change, he will identify right away that the test is outdated and notify the automation team. He will spend much less time than we would. And during this whole time, we're available for adding more testing coverage, investing our time much more efficiently. I think this might be yet another step towards thoughtful investment into automation projects. And the last part of this presentation. If your company struggles to hire experienced automation people, which is also a pain point, see if you can invest in mentoring your manual QA experts. From my experience, they are eager to learn automation. As long as they have a basic programming orientation, and by this I mean understanding of the importance of functions, parameters, conditions, loops. Plus, if they are curious and self disciplined, and there is someone who is experienced enough to lead the automation project, to train the team, to set workflows, to assure that best practices are followed, create some advanced infrastructure blocks for everyone to use in their tests, to help where needed. This might be a good plan towards successful automation. We did it, and it works for us. And no matter if your automation developers are QA engineers or full stack developers, automation is a software and it should work. Therefore, automation projects should be managed quite similar to how any software project is managed. Hold internal learning sessions with other automation contributors of the same project. Grow together by raising challenges, troubleshooting, and suggesting solutions as a team. To avoid duplicate work, ask everyone to present the new components that he or she developed, which others can use. Share detected bugs to prevent submitting duplicate tickets. Record some of these sessions for future onboardings. And invest in test design and code reviews, similarly to how it is done for software development, for the exact same reasons. The only difference between automation project and any other development project is that automation has no QA. So have another pair of eyes on your tests. And celebrate success. Bugs caught by automation before they get to production mean that your hard work was worth it, and it motivates the team for next accomplishments. In this presentation, we saw some examples of why implementing automation project takes time, but also how we can decrease this time, what is worth the effort of investment, and what can and should be skipped. Some team skills and best practices, which are very much recommended in order to build efficient automation projects, and some aspects to consider while evaluating an automation tool. I hope that getting to know these main automation pain points and how to overcome them will help you to decrease implementation effort while increasing efficiency. I thank you for your attention and wish you luck implementing your automation projects. May they be painless and bring value to your company.